The J Pork's legal analysis. Ha! Please Coast Radio.
Joke about rising fascism in America and the fall of democracy, I really thought I was being, like, over the top.
Staten Island niggas still puffing dust plus representing Staten Island.
I mean, like, all kidding aside, I'm a high school dropout. I never thought the words autocracy and kleptocracy would be in my vernacular. I just never thought that would be a thing.
Staten Island niggas still puffing dust plus.
It's very, very difficult and frustrating to have progressive ideology living on Staten Island, or as I call it, North Texas. Example, your weed dealer pulls away and he's got a Trump Pence hat sitting on his back windshield. This is real life.
Representing Staten Island. Staten Island niggas still puffing dust plus.
The most important thing you can do for me listening to this podcast is to not get sidetracked with distractions and nonsense. There is a person occupying the Oval Office who has committed crimes every single day of his life. And the only way to combat this is not to look at polls. It's to go vote in November.
Staten Island niggas still puffing dust plus. Representing Staten Island.
Want to hear a little story about some of those people who are going to be voting in November? I'll tell you. People that value guns over children. People who think the South will rise again. People that think ending slavery was a failed experiment. White nationalists.
Representing Staten Island. Staten Island niggas still puffing dust plus.
Be a part of ending the rise of fascism and the fall of democracy in America by keeping it locked to East Coast Radio, Dyze in your house, and hit the polls in November.
Hey, yo. Who's in the house? Dyze in your house. What goes on, peeps? What is the word? We are back here on East Coast Radio, another action-packed edition of Dyze in your house. You know we only do Wacky Wednesday editions when stuff is hitting the fan, and it's hitting the fan. And Tuesday, August 21st, was a win for the rule of law. And we're going to break it down in a second. Specifically, we're going to break down the 4 o'clock hour of yesterday, of Tuesday, August 21st. The day in which the 1-2 punch of Manafort and Cohen came to a head. And both were found to be pleading guilty or found guilty. Let's break it down. So, you may have been, I almost choked on my coffee. You may have been listening to the Jay Parks podcast. You may be listening to Dyze in your house. You may say to yourself, Jay, you know, you've been talking about this judge. So in the Manafort trial, I had a podcast a couple weeks ago that says, is Judge Ellis aiming for a mistrial? Well, 10 counts got mistrialed. So Judge Ellis successfully got a mistrial out of this, I was going to say concert, out of this, decision. Now let's talk about the jury. people, I mean, for a little, I go back and forth between the jury being crazy and, like, all these things are on paper. How is it taking this long? Well, here's how it takes this long. Remember when I told you that other people had referred to this courthouse in Alexandria, Virginia as the Rocket Docket? I did a little thing. I was like, Rocket Docket, there's a rocket in my pocket, there's a rocket on my docket. I did a whole thing. It was funny. But, so Judge Ellis, like, was speeding along. That's what Rocket Docket means. It means it goes fast. The docket is the court, and it goes fast. Then they're in a rush. So this judge, the prosecution, the government was trying to show all of the evidence, all of the forms, everything to this jury. And the judge is like, all right, you can't show all these exhibits of evidence. Let's move it along. And he was just being all weird. And this is why I mean, we might need term limits on judges. I mean, I don't know. Because this guy successfully mistrialed 10 counts on Paul Manafort's 18 counts of fraud. A lot of notes going to the judge. So here's what happened. So, since they rushed through the deliberations, since they wouldn't let the prosecution show every single piece of evidence they had, because that would have went on for a month, the jury was sent back to deliberate, and they were given these, thousands of documents, these tax documents, that they weren't shown in court, that wasn't explained to them by any prosecutors, and they had to go, and they had to examine them for themselves. They had to examine them for themselves, piece by piece. And they're not, they didn't get to have it explained fully to them from a lawyer. So they keep asking the judge questions. So they send a note to the judge. So every time a note is sent to the judge, so the main people I'm following on Twitter for the justice reports from the courthouse were Ken Delanian and Julia Ainsley. They were both covering the Manafort trial. So I'm tuned into them. Natasha Bertrand was also, rocking things too. So I'm tuned into their Twitter, and there's always the jury has sent a note to the judge, and then Paul Manafort is being led into the courtroom. The jury is being led into the courtroom. And we all brace ourselves. And then it's could we bring a cake on Friday? It's one of the jurors' birthday. I mean, come on, guys. The whole nation is watching you. Then the jury sends a note. Paul Manafort into the courtroom. The jury into the courtroom. The note says, what in case we can't come to a consensus on on one of the 18 counts? Does that affect the other 17 counts? The judge said, go back and talk. Not, well, what do you mean? He just said, go back and deliberate some more. And then at the end of the day, the jury was polled. Because they were torn. They had eight decisions. And they were split on the other 10. And they were polled, and they were told, hey, do you guys think that you can figure this out eventually? And the jury said no. So they issued a partial verdict. And the partial verdict for Paul Manafort still lands him in jail for probably the rest of his life. He's facing at least 10 years in jail, found guilty on 8 counts. These are 5 for tax evasion. This is 1 for not registering a foreign bank account. And I'm not quite sure on the other 2. They were bank fraud. There it is. Bank fraud. Tax evasion, bank fraud, and one of these counts was failure to report a foreign bank account. So, what it tells me is that A, this jury needed to be sequestered, because how do you have the campaign chair of the current occupier of the Oval Office on trial, and the current occupier of the Oval Office tweets like a 14-year-old little girl, like a 14-year-old high school girl who has a crush on Harry Styles or something, and just tweets and tweets and tweets without thinking? How do you not have a sequestered jury? How do they not have electronics? How are they not in Amish country for that week? So Ellis was wacky. He was admonishing the prosecutors. He was telling the jury, go back and figure it out. He says we're not gonna have another. There's no other jury that can decide this but you guys. Like, we don't know anything about. You know, we haven't heard from the jurors yet. But we're gonna figure out what. And here's the reporting from Ken Delaney and Julie Ainsley is that basically the counts he was found guilty on are the counts he did alone. The Rick Gates testimony did nothing. They did not buy Rick Gates. The jury did not believe that Rick Gates was at all credible. So the charges that he was bringing, the assertions he was making, the jury was a little, I don't know about all that. This guy's just trying to get out of trouble. And yeah, he is. And also, Paul Manafort had that same opportunity to get out of trouble. And he chose not to. He chose to run the risk. And here's the problem with Paul Manafort. And I don't mean the problem with his case. I mean the problem with actual Paul Manafort, the person. Even if he believes that he's innocent, which, you know, come on. Dude, you serious, bro? Even if he believes that he's someone who did not break the law, he doesn't have any money. And lawyers cost money. And that might be the reason, I'm just speculating here, the lawyer, Manafort's defense attorney, after the trial, did not come out and immediately say that there was going to be an appeal. He did not come out and immediately say, this is wrong. He thanked the judge for a fair case. He thanked the jury of his peers. And it was very odd. It was almost as if this guy thinks that he's not going to be defending Manafort again because he knows that Manafort is out of money. And all of the Russian oligarchs are sanctioned so they can't use their money. So Paul Manafort, he's got another trial coming up in D.C. in a couple of weeks. It's going to be very interesting. And Paul Manafort's going to have to take a hard look in the mirror and find out exactly what he wants to do. Does he want to talk to Robert Mueller, get some protective custody? Or is he really in fear of the Russians? Because it's not that Paul Manafort's not talking because he's some tough guy thug. I mean, he might present that perception, but he's afraid of Russians. That's what he's afraid of. Jail is safer for him than the world, because he doesn't want to get Sergei Skripal. And I can make that joke because Skripal lived. Okay. So while we're on Paul Manafort, and before we go into Michael Cohen, there's a small piece of news that was actually a very big piece of news. Russian oligarchs sued Christopher Steele for libel because they said that the Steele dossier was lies and, you know, misinformation, and Christopher Steele should be sued for libel, and they should, you know, he should have to, you know, pay restitution to these people for sullying their good name. Yeah, guess what? Court decided that the oligarchs were correctly identified in the judges said the Steele dossier accurate though. That's what they said, and they threw out the lawsuit from the Russian oligarchs. Christopher Steele 1, Vladimir Putin 0.
You have a lot of stuff.
And I am so sick and tired of, sidebar note here real quick, I am so sick and tired of every time. Now all of a sudden this instrumental gets a ad every 3 times it plays. What goes on, man? So there we go. Sorry about that. Sorry about the stopping of the background music. I will make up for it with 3 extra minutes at the end of the podcast. So, the day is going on. The Manafort jury sent in the note about if we can't come to consensus on all 18 counts, does that affect the other counts? So that came in at roughly 12:30. I'm at the mall. I'm refreshing Twitter. Bang, bang, bang. As my girlfriend said to me when she saw me doing that last week, quote, "So this is what you do?" Yes, this is what I do. So, I'm refreshing, I'm waiting. So now when you think if we can't come to a consensus on one, you're thinking that they can't come, they've got 17 things that they've agreed on. That's what you think. But then when it comes out, 8 guilty counts, 10 counts that are mistrialed. The prosecution has 8 days to decide what they want to do. They might just tack those on to the DC trial. The DC trial, by the way, Alexandria, Virginia has a lot more conservatives than Washington, D.C. does. So, there ain't gonna be no mistrials in D.C. Okay, so Paul Manafort, you should really start to think about maybe, you have a history of consulting with Russian oligarchs. Maybe you should start consulting with Robert Mueller. Because remember, Robert Mueller took down the Gambino crime family, Enron. Robert Mueller is he's sort of a big deal. And he's going to fine-tooth comb justice. So as we're waiting, so I'm refreshing Twitter. Just as that happens, we got Michael Cohen surrenders himself to the FBI. Again, this is Michael Cohen is Trump's personal attorney, not from the presidency. He is the personal fixer for the last, decade at least. Now, to quote Michael Avenatti, well, I'm not going to directly quote him, but this is what he said. He said what Trump should have did was should have set Cohen up in the White House in a position with a payment and keep him away from anything. But he didn't do that. What he did was he left Cohen out there to be, because Cohen did shady things for Trump. So when Trump went to the White House, Cohen said, all right, now let's do these shady things for me. No. Eventually, shady things get brought to light. And Lanny Davis, the lawyer for Hillary and Bill Clinton, also the lawyer for Michael Cohen now, who used to be Trump's personal lawyer. If you need a notepad, I will give you a second to get one. He's turned himself into the FBI on 8 counts, 5 of tax evasion. We have 1 of excessive campaign contribution, and 1 is a campaign finance violation. There's another one in there, mixed in, probably a bank fraud thing or something. Interesting, though, the story is that he has not flipped. The story is that he is not giving any information so far. Now, maybe it might be a sealed cooperation agreement, or he might just be looking at this and saying, if I plead to these counts, I'm facing about 5 or 6 years in prison. Now again, this might not be this is probably not Michael Cohen's only legal trouble. He probably has a pending indictment coming for other things. None of the taxi cab stuff was mentioned here. And again, this is not Mueller. This is Southern District of New York. This is not a Robert Mueller thing. Robert Mueller handed off the Cohen case to the Southern District because, to quote the special, not to quote, again, we're just going to sum up what they said. Sources tell people that Robert Mueller doesn't think he needs anything from Michael Cohen for this case. For the Russian part of the case. Robert Mueller's task is not to, quote, bring down Trump. Robert Mueller's task is to look at this campaign, look at the Russian influence, and look at things that arose from that. Corruption is one of those things, but paying off porn stars is not part of the Robert Mueller, scope so far. So, again, keep in mind, this is the same afternoon. I'm watching MSNBC. I got Twitter I'm scrolling. We got Michael Cohen is handing himself over to the FBI right as we are waiting on a Manafort verdict. And, oh, by the way, Trump got on a plane to go to a rally in West Virginia that night. Unscripted. So I was expecting him to drop the N-word at least 17 times just to bring, light to, distract from something. So in his 8 counts 7 and 8 are specific because Michael Cohen said that he made a payment to 2 women at the direction, with the knowledge and at the direction of a candidate in the election. Obviously, we know who the candidate was. So what does that make Trump? Unindicted, unnamed co-conspirator. That's what it makes him. He's named. Sound a little familiar? This is getting good. This is getting really good. But again, Michael Cohen has not, in public, there is nothing in public that says he has agreed to cooperate. He has agreed to cooperate with federal investigators. He's pleading. Maybe he's pleading. So he's not... Paul Manafort's like 68, 69 years old or whatever. Michael Cohen is... he might be old. He's not that old. Michael Cohen's probably thinking, listen, if I can plead guilty to something that's 5 years, and I got Lanny Davis, maybe I can get that down, then I can write a book. You know what? Someone's gonna buy a book, someone's gonna buy the rights to the Michael Cohen story. You know that's gonna happen. So, possibly, he's just looking at, I'm gonna get this over with. But again, I don't know, because there might be indictments coming down. There might be indictments, there might be more charges that Michael Cohen is charged with. We don't know. We're not sure, because all we know is that he turned himself in, and for some reason, there is no indication that he is cooperating as of now. Now listen, that might be a protection thing. They might be hiding his cooperation. But all the analysts on TV that I saw say that, he's not necessarily flipping. He's pleading guilty to crimes he committed. But on counts 7 and 8, when he said that he made those payments to women with the knowledge and at the direction of the candidate, the judge didn't ask him that. He offered up that information voluntarily under oath in court. Trump was not named. But candidate 1 is now named because of Michael Cohen. Because Michael Cohen voluntarily offered up that information in court. Why would he do that if he's not flipping? Maybe he's doing that to piss Trump off. Maybe he's like, listen, I'm not going to flip because I'm, Russian mobbed up and stuff. But here's what I am going to do. I'm going to go to jail, and I'm going to come out of jail, and I'm going to make millions on a tell-all book. Not that he's going to write himself, that he's going to have, he'll hire a writer. Possibly Emily Jane Fox, or Donnie Deutsch will find someone to write it. Tom Arnold, Reverend Al Sharpton. These are all people that Michael Cohen has been talking to. So I don't know. But here's what I do know. I know that the walls, my friends, they're closing in. And I do know that right when Michael Cohen was walking into court for his 4 o'clock for his 4 o'clock court date, Tuesday, April 21st. At that same time, the jury was being led back into the courtroom in Alexandria, Virginia, to deliver 8 guilty verdicts and send Paul Manafort to prison for the rest of his life. Cohen, guilty. Manafort, guilty. Gates, guilty. Papadopoulos, guilty. Flynn, guilty. It's a lot of witches. That is a whole lot of witches. And so, like, I'm celebrating. I'm having pizza. I'm texting everybody I know. Who cares? So, you know, my girlfriend, and that was it. Sitting there with my mom trying to explain it to her, but she doesn't have a hearing aid in, so she can't figure it out. And Trump is setting up the pardon for Manafort. He called him a nice man who worked for Dole and Reagan. But here's the thing. Since he was found guilty on those 8 crimes, now state attorney generals can bring charges against Paul Manafort. And Paul Manafort, and you can't be pardoned from state charges. These crimes are federal, so the state AGs need to act quickly. But once they do, those crimes are unpardonable. And so, you know that what Trump's game plan was going to be. He's already, you know, Cohen's a liar, barely knew him, hardly had anything to do with me, just like Manafort. So, if that was going to be his defense, well, if he was planning on that being his defense, then what had happened is that reality TV caught up and bit him right in the ass. Because before the White House or Trump could even draft a response, could even smear Cohen for having nothing to do with the campaign, Omarosa called Chris Matthews. Omarosa called Chris Matthews and said, "Yo, I got a videotape. I'll see you at 7. Damn, yo. Not to be outdone. So Omarosa comes on, and first of all, the legitimizing of Omarosa is very weird. Because she was on a panel with, like, Ken Vogel from the New York... Like, she wasn't a guest. She was on the panel. What has happened? So Omarosa, they play this videotape of Michael Cohen on, like, Air Force One with, like, you know, he's going to meet Trump or whatever, and there's, like, all these people there, and it's a party that Michael Cohen, like, organized, and he's, like, you know, shaking hands with everybody. He's so involved, and he's so cozy, and it looks like, you know, this is his family, and it's like, man, she really, like, cut off that defense of, we don't know this guy. Yeah, you do. We got tapes. You know who else has tapes? Michael Cohen has tapes. Lordy. I'm so glad there are tapes. And I'm really glad that this happened before I went on vacation. Friday, I'm leaving for Jersey. And Saturday, we're taking a trip down. Me, my girlfriend, the whole fam, 2 dogs. No cats because, you know, I don't know. I wish we can take my cat, but my cat's not allowed to walk on the beach with me. Can you just imagine that? Me and my cat walking on the beach? That'd be totes adorable. But no. My cat has to stay home. But I'm going to North Carolina, the Outer Banks. It's a beach house and shit. Beach house with a personal pool, jacuzzi, 5 bathrooms, nice little trail of woods I can, you know, inhale and exhale in. Like, and I'm going to be there, and Paul Manafort's going to be sleeping in prison. I think that's phenomenal. So, like, now I can go on vacation and I cannot feel, pardon the pun, guilty. J. Porks, Dyze in your house. Hey, yo. J. Porks here. Back to recording my own commercials. And here's the deal. You may have heard me complaining on today's podcast or a previous podcast about suffering through a summer of unemployment. Well, we have a fix for that, and it is called Patreon. That's right. East Coast Radio now has a Patreon page, and all you need to do is go to patreon.com/jporks, and there are 3 tiers that you can subscribe to, 3 tiers you can join to become a member of East Coast Radio, of the East Coast Radio community, of Porks Nation. You'll even have a chance to pick the name and all that stuff. And we are not offering just thank yous and shout outs. We got bonus content. There is even a tier where you are able to talk to me on the phone every week. And we will go over what is happening in our country. And you could personally talk to me, Jay Pork. Personal interactions. There's a tier where there's a group. You can join a group, and you could affect where the podcast goes that week. I need a community. I need help. Not necessarily money, but I need people to be helping me out. So therefore, that's why I created a East Coast Radio Patreon. Not to be confused with a GoFundMe or a Kickstarter. This is not me with my handout. I have bonus content. Bonus content to offer you. I have tons of it. I have tons of time, and I want to give it to you. All you need to do is join us on Patreon. Become a Patreon. Patreon.com/jporks. Look for the East Coast Radio Patreon page. You'll see me. With a microphone and Dyze in my house. Dyze in your house next to the name. You'll see that. So just go hit us on Patreon. You will get a thank you. I will know that, and you will have a lot to do with what goes down on the J Porks podcast and everything concerned with East Coast Radio. It's going to be a big year for us. 2018. Let's get it done. Hey. Did you stick around? Good. Let me tell you about what we're doing this week. Dyze in your house after show. If you stuck around and you didn't just hit stop, then you're going to find out what we're doing on Monday. Now, as you know, as you may have heard just there, I will be on vacation next week. But don't worry, you will not be missing out. You will not be missing out on an episode of the J Porks podcast, which comes to you on Monday. We are pre-recording an episode that focuses on a couple of things, important things, things that can't be dated. So that is going to come to you on Monday as scheduled. So don't worry, never fear. And for Friday's episode of Dyze in Your House, today's episode is going to serve as this week's Dyze in Your House. The following Friday, as I still will be in North Carolina, we may have to go live with Dyze in Your House. We may do it live on YouTube, which in turn would probably go to iTunes, I think. So, if I add it to the playlist afterwards. So, what you guys have to do is go follow my YouTube page, the YouTube channel that has all my podcasts on it, and that is I'm going to look for the name right now. It's the J Porks podcast. Just look for J Porks. Well, you just search East Coast Radio and find the channel that has that on it, because I have two YouTube channels. One of them is they're both J Porks. One of them is for my concert videos. One of them is for my podcasts. I've mixed them both up because I have concert videos on this one too. But go to the one that's at jporkspodcast@gmail.com. Not jporks@gmail.com. So you find that and you subscribe to that, and you'll be notified when I'm going live with an episode of Dyze in Your House. You never know what's going to happen. Listen, we're on Crazy Watch right now. You know Trump's going to do something crazy to distract from all this nonsense. We just don't know what it is yet. I thought he was going to say the N-word a bunch of times last night. So we're going to find out. So I just want to let you know that, guys, I'm not one of these people that goes away and says, I'm taking a break from all of this. Just I'm taking a break for a week, but it's all gonna be good. It's all gonna be good. I'll be back. No. I'm not tuning out the news cycle. Apologies to the people I will be on vacation with. I'm not tuning out the news cycle. I am not paying attention to this. I will be tweeting. I will be social mediaing. It just might be a little more sunny. Hopefully. So keep it locked. You got to keep it locked. jporks.com. At jporks on Twitter. At Least Coast Radio on Twitter. That's where I'm going to be trying to direct a lot of my political steam there. You go to patreon.com/jporks and you become a Least Coast Radio head. We only have a couple of more days left in August until the Patreon prices go back up to their normal rate. Right now they are slashed. More than half off every tier. Get yourself some bonus content, individualized artwork, shout outs on the podcast, input on the podcast, and even personally getting to talk to me over the phone or Skype once a week or whatever, just to talk about things. You get to be my BFF. And all you have to do is go to patreon.com/jporks and become a Least Coast Radio head. Least Coast Radio for the least heard voices. This is where we unravel the strands on the sweater of corruption. And yes, we want to destroy that sweater. Okay. That's really it now. We are back. Stay tuned for Monday for a brand new edition of the J Parks Podcast, where we're going to be talking about 3 topics that are not going away. So, until then, resist, remove, and fight for recreational. Late.
Representing Staten Island.